Hello and welcome to my presentation. I will be talking through a teaching resource that I've created for the purpose of improving learning within art and design education. According to Ofsted, children see before they speak, make marks before they write, build before they walk, but their ability to appreciate and interpret what they observe, communicate what they think and feel, or make what they imagine and invent is influenced by the quality of their art, craft and design education. I will explain a strong theological underpinning to demonstrate my knowledge and understanding of the teaching of art and design education within secondary schools. My resource was created for a Key Stage 3 Year 7 class who are currently studying the formal elements of art and design, following the criteria and expectations of the Edexcel Art Exam Board. The Edexcel Art Exam Board explains that the GCSE Art and Design qualification requires students to acquire and develop technical skills through working with a broad range of media, materials, techniques, processes and terminologies with purpose and intent. After observing the class, I felt that the students had reached the stage where I was confident in their ability in art and in my ability to manage behaviour to move on to using clay. As the students had successfully worked with paper, watercolour and pens, I was happy to introduce the techniques associated with using clay. The students' work task was to create a clay owl using shape, line, form, pattern and texture. This was a key factor in the national curriculum for art and design to become proficient in drawing, painting, sculpture and other art and design techniques. Once the clay owls had been cured correctly in the kiln, the students were tasked to select the primary Christmas colours and 2 different designs to decorate their clay owls. This allowed the students to draw upon knowledge gained from previous lessons and primary colours and patterns. This also allowed the students to use their imagination and expressiveness to create a bespoke, unique piece. Previous classes in art and design were structured and specific. However, the lesson using clay allowed the students to choose the patterns and textures they wanted to work with. This was important as the first part of the clay lesson involved the students following instructions and using specific templates. Allowing the students to show individual art form and design is essential in art classes. Prior to the creation of the clay owls, I discussed the topic with the class and set a homework of creating an owl out of nature sources. This can be seen in the right-hand corner of the slide. The objective of the homework was to allow the students to explore the proposed topic. This also enabled the students the element of choice to individualise their homework. The homework preparation for the creation of the clay owl allowed the students to experiment and self-direct with different shapes within nature to create texture and pattern. In addition, students were able to observe previous examples of students' work. This enabled all students to approach the creation of a clay owl with an end product in mind. As well as successful examples, the students was also shown examples of clay owls that were faulty because the clay had not set properly, resulting in parts of the clay owl falling off. This sets an example of common mistakes when working with clay and the consequences this may lead to. According to Richard Hickman and Anthony Hayes, students need to stretch and explore learning to reach beyond one's capacities, to explore playfully without preconceived plan, and embrace the opportunity to learn from mistakes and accidents. I implemented this theory when allowing the students to spend time experimenting with clay to create their own patterns. I deliberately started my demonstration from scratch to mirror the students' activity and to allow me to verbally respond to any problems or misunderstandings along the way. I understood from knowledge of Addison and Berger's theory, ensuring access to sensory experiments through visual and tactile materials, resources in art and design demonstrations and activities has a positive impact on the students' art and design learning process. The lesson included both visual observation by demonstration and visual resources. Here are examples of the PowerPoint slides which were used throughout the presentation to give instructions and visual diagrams to assist the students, enabling the students to have a visual interpretation of the objective. The PowerPoint slides were presented as a sequence of activities to ensure that all students followed the correct order and procedures to make the clay owls. In addition to the PowerPoint was an A1 resource board which was visible to the students, which are referred to during my presentation. Elliot Einsner states, "The workspace that children employ is a kind of laboratory of their efforts. This laboratory makes it possible for children to find out what happened when one thing rather than another is done." Once the clay owls were ready to be put in a kiln, a lot of the students asked questions as to why and how long the kiln would take. Anticipating this might happen, I provided a slide within my presentation and used artistic terminology to explain why the clay owls had to go into the kiln. It was my hope that the making of the clay owls would be an experience that the students would not only learn from and enjoy, but also hold as a working memory, which will eventually retain within the student's long-term memory. According to Peterson and Peterson, the working memory can be identified as a memory system where small amounts of information are stored for a very short duration. This is evident in a classroom of children, where limited capacity to store information. If working memory is overloaded, there is greater risk that the content being taught will not be understood by the learner. I ensured that each time I gathered the students around the demonstration table that they should raise their hands and ask questions. I used artistic vocabulary and terminology when answering questions. The objective of this was to increase the students' knowledge of the artistic vocabulary. This process is evident in the book Understanding Art, a Guide for Teachers, where it states, "Through talking about what has been perceived, they can extend their descriptive knowledge and vocabulary and become more confident in its use." I use resources to provide clarity on what the lesson objective was within the sequence of lessons. This is similar to scaffolding process used commonly within teaching to break a large topic up into smaller tasks, allowing one stage of the process to be completed before the next has begun. This helped to ensure the students remained on target for the objective and did not become overwhelmed. Here we have step-by-step instructions which were displayed on the whiteboard and additionally given out as printouts on each table for the students to be able to view whilst working. According to Addison and Burgess, by means of mass production and newer technologies, students are now learning through visual arts. This theory enabled me to adapt resources to teach students to understand expectations of work visually and allowed them to ask questions on stages of the process they did not understand through visual learning and information by demonstration. Finally, as can be seen above the clay diagrams, inspiration was taken from the artists Robert and Sarah Delaney. The students were familiar with these artists as they have been referencing them throughout their work while studying and interpreting pattern, print, shape and colour. This allowed me to provide the class with previous reference and explanation. Nicholas Addison identifies within the scheme of work the extent of which is considered both in terms of prior knowledge and available time is evident to each individual art class. By drawing upon the students' prior knowledge that they learned from previous lessons, I was able to use my time within the scheme of work more efficiently to reinforce learning, which helped the students retain information more effectively. Marlowe, 1975, comments on the importance of establishing routines and conventions within the classroom. Referencing and applying Marlowe's knowledge, I have established my own routine. As a starter for the class, I displayed different artworks of owls to the students and asked the students to identify what was used to create each piece. In order to demonstrate what I wanted the students to achieve, I asked the students to gather around the table for a class demonstration. I asked thought-provoking questions that stretched their knowledge but was mindful of their ability and limitations. As stated within an article by the National Society for Education in Art and Design, set the bar high with expectations that seek answers at the limit of ability, knowledge, and understanding. This is a method that I have applied throughout my teaching, as I feel questioning the students within practical demonstrations encourages the students to stay engaged and focused. I concluded with a plenary, which included a demonstration of how I would like the pupils to clean the workspace. Once the workspace had been cleared, the class were gathered to discuss the final finished clay owls. This provided another opportunity to use art terminology. My lesson observation concluded with feedback by my teacher mentor. He told me that my relationship I had built up with the students was excellent, and I had a strong understanding of preparing questions and demonstrating artistic dialogue. He stated that the teacher resource and examples I had prepared prior to the class helped the class to come together well. He thought the process that I used to teach facilitated all learner ideas, which provided a positive learning environment. I agree with the theory that Carl Rogers argues that facilitating rather than dictating teaching and the creation of a positive and supportive classroom environment were key to meaningful learning environments. He said that my in-flight checks through the lesson were sparse and stated I had spent too much time going around to help individual students and not enough time to observe the class as a whole. My mentor feedback has allowed me to reflect upon my lesson and consider different ways that I could have taught the lesson or made improvements. I can use my feedback positively to improve my teaching ability. As stated in The Problem of Assessment in Art and Design by Trevor Raymond, when referring to lesson planning, he stated it must be planned and structured to ensure it maximises student attainment and achievement. I agree with this statement, and I feel this is an area I need to improve on within my lessons. Ultimately, a critical approach enables pupils to understand that art is not limited to the making of beautiful, useful, and imaginative things alone. It is also a form of communication, an opportunity for them to find, construct, and share meanings and make sense of experiences both from within and outside the national curriculum. I have been fortunate to be able to attend colleagues' classes who have also created clay owls with different finishes. I have been able to draw upon my observations of the delivery of the lesson and the students' response. I chose a different composition technique that incorporated elements of art that my Year 7 class had been using within previous lessons to finish my set of clay owls. This slide visually displays the artwork created within the sequence of lessons that I taught. On the left-hand side, you can see the intricate detail the students have created using clay tools. You can also see an example of one of the clay evaluation sheets that I created for the class in the top right-hand corner of the slide. The primary Christmas colour themed owls found on the right-hand side of the slide are a selection of the finished products. I have also included photos of the resource boards displayed in the class for design and pattern inspiration for the students. As experts within the education field, such as Robert Clement in the Art Teacher's Handbook 1993 has stated, it is important to know something about the normal pattern of work in art and craft in primary schools. In order to know your own syllabus or programme of work begins to make some kind of sense in the sequence to what has gone on before. I had an awareness of the students' ability as I had observed previous primary school work and had discussed students with other teachers. This information helped with planning the lesson. This slide gives a visual insight into the work that Year 7s have been creating prior to working with clay. This work was inspired by Robert and Sarah Delaney, alongside colour theory, pattern and line workshops. It is essential that the students build up upon previous knowledge and theories. According to the Edexcel exam board requirements, referring to visual exemplars to establish a secure understanding of how descriptors relate to practical evidence. Upon self-reflection, I felt my prior preparation and resources helped my lessons to run smoothly. My resources provided opportunities to allow the students to be aware of what they needed to achieve throughout the lesson. I was fortunate to assist within the class before teaching, which allowed me to adapt the lesson to the class-specific needs I had observed. I was proud of the outcomes of the students' work they had produced. My university lecturer suggested I could have used a reference that related to nature. She suggested the artist Sheila Tidmouth. This is something that if I was to teach a lesson again, I would use artists relating to nature within their work. If I was to teach the sequence of lessons again, I would be able to reflect upon my weekly mentor meetings and observations to improve my teaching in confidence. To conclude, I felt my resource had a positive impact on the students' learning, and the sequence of lessons creating the clay owl allowed for all abilities of students to achieve the objective within a positive working environment.